Welcome to the Health Trip Podcast. My name is Jill Foose. I'm a functional medicine and integrative nutrition health coach. I created this podcast to bring you along as we travel down intriguing, science-packed roads, debunking old medical paradigms and perusing new innovative therapies and modalities with the finest functional medicine doctors, practitioners, and like-minded biohackers while living our best life. Enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode on the Health Trip Podcast. Improving your lifestyle during the postmenopausal phase can profoundly impact health and quality of life. Midlife women often say that they haven't changed anything in their daily routine, yet they are riddled with weight gain, belly fat, anxiety, depression, brain fog, low sexual desire, low energy, loss of muscle mass, and hair loss. As women experience a shift and decline in their sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, physiological changes occur. And whether you decide to go on MHT or not, which is menopause hormone therapy, your lifestyle may need to shift, which means your mindset may need to shift. There's a sea of misleading and fearful information, including some very savvy marketing about what supplements to buy, what nutrition program to buy into, and many home tests to take to gather more data about yourself, but no one's there to help you navigate the results. What if you missed the MHT boat and are no longer a candidate? What if you are on MHT and wish to optimize your health and don't know where to start? Are you eating, sleeping, and moving to benefit yourself as you age? Are you setting yourself up for this next phase of your life so that you can remain independent for as long as possible? Dr. Carla DiGirolamo is back for another episode discussing all things related to post-menopausal women. She is a double board certified obstetrician, gynecologist, and reproductive endocrinologist who specializes in the care of reproductive age and midlife women. Dr. Carla completed her residency training in obstetrics and gynecology at Brown University Medical School, Women and Infants Hospital, and her reproductive endocrinology fellowship training at the Massachusetts General Hospital at Harvard Medical School. She is a North American Menopause Society, or NAMS, certified menopause practitioner, and has been featured in multiple podcasts and speakerships at various events discussing the physiological and hormonal changes of menopause, hormone therapy, and optimizing physical performance in elite and avid recreational female athletes. Dr. Carla has also been in the fitness industry her entire life as a recreational athlete and for the last decade as a fitness professional with credentials as a CrossFit Level 1 trainer and certified nutrition coach. How many doctors do you know have those credentials? As a pioneer in women's performance endocrinology, her focus is on optimizing physical performance in women in high performance professions and female athletes of all ages. She has over 17 years of experience practicing as a fertility specialist and more recently as a menopause health consultant. And she's been featured in Boston Magazine's Top Doctors in the Boston area for 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23, and I'm sure it'll be 2024. Short medical disclaimer before we dive in with Dr. Carla. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice or to make any lifestyle changes to treat any medical condition in yourself or others. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. And this entire disclaimer also applies to any of my guests on my podcast. So sit back, open your minds, and let's dive in with Dr. Carla. Hi, Dr. Carla. Welcome back to the Health Trip Podcast.
Hi, Jill. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here again. Last time we did a little Q&A on midlife women, and today we're really honing in on the post-menopausal woman. And perimenopause is sort of the star of the show right now in terms of social media, marketing products. It's getting a lot of attention, which is amazing, right? We want to start early and educate that group of women. But the postmenopausal women are feeling a little bit left out of the conversation. Some of them feeling a little bit regretful that maybe they weren't on top of their health or they didn't have the right doctor to have the conversation. They didn't know to have the conversation. And so I wanted to just hear from you a little bit on your thoughts on postmenopause, menopause hormone therapy, and all the things.
Okay, I think that's great, and I think you're absolutely right. Perimenopause does get a lot of attention, which it needs, but we need to pay the same attention to those years after menopause. So, excuse me. What I thought we could do is first let's define it because it's not necessarily straightforward. Some people think that, oh, if my FSH is 100, then I must be menopausal. No, it's that diagnosis is based on your periods. And what the definition of menopause is when you are 1 year beyond your final menstrual period. So you could have had your final menstrual period and not yet realize it, but like a year later, when it's like, oh, ding, 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 I haven't had a period in a year, I'm now menopausal. So that's the definition by the books. And then you have the first phase, which is called early menopause. And then you also have a second phase, which is late menopause. And this is taken from, it's called the straw system. And it's a very common system that defines all the stages of a woman's reproductive life. And at the end, you have these two phases of menopause. Early menopause is within 5 years of that final menstrual period, or within 5 years of menopause, which is 1 year beyond that final menstrual period. And late menopause is beyond 5 years. And why do we make this distinction? The reason is because when you become menopausal, things just don't stop like that. It's not like, okay, we turn into a pumpkin when we're 1 year beyond our
Hmm.
final period. It's a gradual tapering down of hormonal activity in the ovaries. And so what's happening in early menopause is that there's still sometimes some hormonal firing from the ovaries that isn't enough to give you a cycle that results in a menses, but it's enough to make you have some symptoms, and it's enough to make you notice. And then once you're more than 5 years beyond that, that kind of random hormonal firing going on happens less and less and less, and things are much, much more quiescent. So those are kind of the definitions that we're looking at. So if we look at menopause in general, whether it's early or late, some things compared to perimenopause get better, and some things may stay the same, some things may worsen. For instance, hot flashes typically get better. They can last for about 7 to 10 years on average. But then as menopause wears on, they do tend to taper off. So that is the good news. Things that don't tend to get better are things like vaginal dryness and urinary incontinence. That does continue to get worse. So it's really good to jump on those things really early, so that you can, mitigate that continued decline that will continue to happen. So that's kind of what to expect. I've had a lot of women tell me that they feel better once they hit menopause. Like perimenopause for them was this massive roller coaster of hormones. They don't know which way is up. But then when those hormones settle out, they feel a whole heck of a lot better. So there are some things to look forward to, I think, once your cycles really tone down. But I think that probably is a good launching pad for the rest of our conversation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to look forward to. There's freedom, right? We're aging and our kids are getting out of
Sure.
the house. You're taking your son to college this year. My kids are all out of the house. We have more freedom to explore travel adventure, or maybe a new career or a new hobby, things like that. That's all amazing.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, but there are definitely some lingering symptoms, and you touched on one, the vaginal dryness, and I want to talk about MHT for that, because for the postmenopausal, oh, and also you're postmenopausal until you die, correct? Like
Correct.
that's you're not postmenopausal and then at like 72 you're
You
void
don't
of
go through
any.
puberty again.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's just that's the term for the rest of your life. So in
Yep.
terms of vaginal dryness, which is something that I hear about from a lot of my postmenopausal clients who are not on MHT, is it too late for them to start something like vaginal estrogen?
Vaginal estrogen, low dose vaginal estrogen for the purpose of helping with dryness and genital urinary syndrome of menopause, which is urinary plus vaginal symptoms. It is never too late to start that. And the reason is because the low dose vaginal estrogen doesn't get absorbed appreciably into the circulation. It's designed to act locally in the vaginal tissue and in the tissues surrounding, the urinary system. And so you can use that safely, even in your later years. With menopausal hormone therapy, that is meant to be systemic. That is a bit more complicated, and that is a very individualized conversation with every woman, because there are risks when you initiate it after 60. But nothing is ever completely off the table. Every woman's an individual. But hormone therapy for vaginal symptoms, urinary symptoms, that is pretty safe, even if you want to start it later.
Yeah. And recently there was a study that came out about um, women age 65 and older who were either could safely stay on their menopause hormone therapy if they've already started it,
Mhm.
or like you said, you have to have a nuanced, individualized approach to seeing if you are a candidate to start it.
Yes, that's correct. And I'm glad you made that distinction, because it's very different, the person who has been on menopausal hormone therapy with no complication, enjoying the benefits and staying on it, as compared to a woman who is now 62, 63, who wants to start it. Those are two very, very different risk categories. And the reason is because if you're going to have a complication like a blood clot related complication, which could be a cardiac event, it could be a pulmonary embolism or a deep venous clot in the legs or whatever, that usually happens within the first 1 to 2 years after starting it. So when it's started later, the risk of that happening is even greater than when you first start it when you're younger, within the first 10 years of menopause onset. So the reasons really do have to be compelling to initiate it in those later years, because the risks are much higher. But in women who have been on it safely all along and their risk profile hasn't changed and they're enjoying the benefits of it, there's no reason they shouldn't stay on it.
Yeah, that's great. Great information. So regardless of being on menopause hormone therapy for that postmenopausal woman or not, I think that lifestyle is just going to look different, right? The way we lived our lives in our 20s, our 30s, and our 40s probably are not going to work for us when we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. So I want to talk about some of the lifestyle interventions, because a lot of women who are in this postmenopausal phase and choose not to explore MHT for whatever their feeling is about it, um, we need to talk about lifestyle interventions here, right? And I'd like to start with nutrition and the balanced diet and what that might look for this age woman.
So it's very similar to the perimenopausal crowd when the hormones start changing, but and is even more important as we get further along in the transition and beyond menopause onset. And that is what the physiologic changes are to our bodies and how that impacts the fuel that we need to fuel our activities. So one of the big things that happens is a relative insulin resistance. So and that doesn't mean like you do a blood test and, oh, your insulin's high. It could mean that, because we know that that is more common as we get older, but it doesn't necessarily show up in a blood test. It's a relative inefficiency of your insulin to process sugar and burn it off rather than store it as fat. And that happens because as estrogen levels decline and estrogen receptors on tissues like muscle, which use a lot of sugar, as those receptors change, the utilization of glucose changes. And so that's why we tend to store more as fat, because we're not burning it as effectively as we did. So the thing you want to be a little more mindful of is, I remember when I was in my early 40s, I could go on vacation and eat an ice cream cone every night and there would be no repercussions. Now I'm 53, not so much. I really feel it. It triggers my hot flashes, and it just doesn't work so well for me anymore. So doesn't mean I can never have an ice cream cone again. It just means that I can't have it every night when I'm on vacation. So you just kind of have to modify a little bit. But you have to be a little bit more careful about sugars. Now that doesn't mean that you have to go low carb. I don't want us to think that, because you still need carbohydrates and you need a lot of them, but you need to have high quality ones like sweet potatoes and brown rice and quinoa and things like that, and focus attention away from those processed sugars, because we just can't tolerate them as well as we used to. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. The other thing is protein.
Wait, I want to
Protein.
stop you there first
Okay,
before we hit
sure.
on protein. So
Hmm.
about Carbohydrates. So I am that woman. I've been insulin resistant for the last 25 years because I had a partial thyroidectomy. Um, and so that's, there's a lot of women out there with hypothyroidism. And so that also is very much connected to your metabolism and your insulin. Um, so I work very, very hard on my nutrition to have I have a low carb approach, but I don't negate carbs either. So for someone like me, if I eat a lot of starch, I'm going to feel absolutely horrible and I'm going to gain weight overnight. Versus if I eat a lot of low glycemic carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables, sometimes I do throw in things like lower glycemic grains like buckwheat or quinoa. Um, but overall, I have a low carb approach, which seems to really work for me. I also have done a deep dive in genetics for my cardiovascular disease risk, which is extremely high because of my family history. I sort of went down that rabbit hole with a preventive cardiologist. And he was also saying how, people that have these poor genetics, poor family history, a lower carb approach or a lower glycemic approach to eating, especially in postmenopause, is probably going to be more beneficial. What are your thoughts on that? I mean,
I think
are
it's
we saying the same things?
I think it's very individual. I think there are some people, like in your circumstance, who would benefit from that. But what we have learned from the International Olympic Committee consensus report on LEA and Red-S is that one of the biggest culprits of LEA is insufficient carbohydrate intake. And LEA and Red-S is not unique to young female athletes. It is a huge problem in the menopausal population, whether it's perimenopause or menopause. Women just go on the fad diets. They think they have to be low carb and they throw themselves into LEA. So I think
Describe what that is for the community listening.
low energy availability is when you have an imbalance in the fueling in the energy that you're expending as compared to the energy that you are taking in. So it's the overtraining, underfueling sort of situation. Now, you don't have to be an athlete to overtrain and underfuel.
Right.
As normal people, as general population, we burn off calories every day. We have a certain level of physical activity. And whether you are an athlete or whether you are an average person, you need fuel to do that. And if there's an imbalance in that, you're going to be into LEA. And in menopause, this is a real problem because women are particularly sensitive to energy balance, just the way we're wired. And so what
Yeah.
happens is when the energy is out of balance, then it triggers the stress response system. And now your cortisol starts to go crazy because it thinks that you're starving because you're not fueling yourself sufficiently. And in menopause, we don't handle those cortisol spikes quite as easily as we did before. So what I find in my population is that so many women, it's like painting a broad brushstroke to everybody. I think some people do benefit on low carb. I think some people do well on keto, but that's not most people.
Yeah.
Most people, it's a spectrum. And to your point about doing, genetic analysis and having an individualized approach is really important because the low carb approach that works for you may not be
Right.
what works for somebody else and could put them into LEA and really cause problems.
Yeah. And also I find that postmenopausal women, um, are feeling that weight gain. They're feeling that tire around their midsection and it sucks. And a lot of people go through this and we look down and we think, all right, I'm just not going to eat as much food. And that's the other part, right? You're talking also about energy coming from specific calories, carbohydrates, which is one form of fuel. Fats is another form of fuel, but it's also about calories in versus calories out. And a lot of women start drastically under eating their calories,
And
which
they throw
also,
themselves into LEA. And
yeah,
then what happens is when the cortisol spikes, it holds on to fat. So it makes it even harder
yeah,
to lose that spare tire around your belly. So when I have people that come to me and they're complaining of that weight gain, the first thing I ask them about is their nutrition and their training. And so many times, at least 50% of the time, they're in LEA. And a lot of times, menopausal symptoms, whether you're peri or whether you're postmenopause, they look just like the symptoms of low energy availability: emotional ability, anxiety, sleep disturbance, fatigue, all the same kind. It's a huge overlap between the symptoms of menopause, and so many doctors will misdiagnose it and just say, oh, you're menopausal, and not even ask them about their nutrition and their fueling. And then they go on, and they come to me because they're frustrated because nothing's working, and it's like, oh, you're training for the Boston Marathon on 1,200 calories a day. Well, no wonder why you're cranky, no wonder why you're not sleeping, no wonder why your body is hanging on to fat. So it's a real problem. It's a real problem, and it really does require an individualized approach.
So for most people, when we talk about carbs, do you recommend a certain amount per day? Forget someone like me that has a very nuanced approach to it for specific health reasons, but do you recommend a certain percentage of their diet, their daily intake from carbohydrates? And does it matter?
I don't paint everybody with a broad brushstroke because, you could have two athletes. One is a marathon runner, the other is a power lifter. They are going to use calories and use macronutrients much differently. Their age, their musculature, are they an endomorph? Are they an ectomorph? There are so many nuances that I honestly cannot paint it with a broad brushstroke and say that one size fits all. But what I can say from the International Olympic Committee consensus statement, they're saying that people should be getting, and I'm pulling this out of my memory, I believe it is 45 grams per kilogram of, it's either body weight or fat-free mass. I'd have to pull out the equation, but the reference is the IOC Olympic, which is International Olympic Committee consensus statement on Red S. And that came out this year in 2024. Their recommendations, and a really nice study that they cite is in there that shows what, the danger zone and the weight loss zone and the maintenance zone is. And I think that's as close as it comes to a general recommendation. But again, I think the people they were studying were not necessarily menopausal women. So the
Right,
next study
right.
kind of has to be in menopausal women. But again,
Yeah,
everybody is so different. I honestly don't want to come out and say that,
yeah, of
put a
course.
stamp on it, one size fits all, because it doesn't.
Right. But the important thing about carbs is fiber, right? We need fiber. Let's just talk about fiber for a second, because there are a lot of people who might not fare well on eating too much fiber. Either they have gut health issues that they're unresolved, or perhaps they don't even like it. So if that's that person, or for just the regular postmenopausal woman navigating this new lifestyle, what are your thoughts on how much fiber we need? And do you have any tips or tricks to try to get more in?
Again, I don't have a solid number. I think, if people are having GI disturbance, sometimes a gut study is a really great tool.
Yep.
There can be food intolerances that develop during this stage of life because the immune system, everything is changing in this stage of life. So if one is experiencing, distress and it's not immediately obvious, a gut study is a really good way to go. As far as fiber goes, I go with whole foods. You can find lots of foods with lots of fiber just in the whole foods. I'm not a big supplement person for
Yep.
fiber. However, if you're somebody that doesn't tolerate vegetables, some people get a lot of gastric distress from vegetables and you just can't get enough, then sure, there's other fiber sources out there. But I do generally like whole foods. I love apples. I think apples are a fantastic source of fiber, and they are a fantastic low glycemic carbohydrate as well. I love them pre-workout. It's just one of my favorite foods. I just love apples. So that's a really good source of fiber.
Yeah.
But
I love
fruits,
apples
vegetables.
too, and I can't eat apples. They make me bloated, and
Mm,
it's a horrible reaction that I have to all apples, which sucks because I love those Honeycrisp ones. Let's move on to protein.
mhm.
Is there any special approach to eating protein for women who are postmenopausal?
You got to get enough of it because when you're menopausal, one of the things that's happening is the changes in the hormones are resulting in an increased loss of muscle and bone mass. And so the things that build up our bones and our muscles is protein because that's what they are made out of. So getting enough protein is the first priority. So you got to figure out how much you're getting. And what are the recommendations? It's about a gram per pound of body weight. So if you're a 130-pound woman, your target, and I say target because it's not necessarily easy to achieve, your target would be
Right.
130 grams of protein a day. How do you get it? Well, it depends. If you are vegan, this is going to be a challenge, but I do know some vegans who can manage to at least get in the ballpark. There's lentils, there's lots of, tofu, lots of protein sources that vegans find, and they can make do with that. There's some great protein shakes with plant-based protein for a vegan that may not be getting it all in her diet. So there are ways to do it. If you are one that doesn't have food restrictions like that, lean animal meat is great. Poultry, fish are fantastic. Red meat isn't bad once in a while. It's got great sources of creatine in it.
Mhm.
So a varied supply of proteins, of varied sources is probably ideal. But certainly people do have intolerances or just different preferences that, you have to kind of just work within that. But a gram per pound of body weight is a general guide for people to strive for.
Yeah, I was also reading a study this week on the way that women process amino acids as we age and how it's very difficult. So, estrogen is anabolic. And when we start becoming more estrogen deficient, especially if you're someone who's not on menopause hormone therapy, that now you're going to require more protein than you even think because you need more amino acids to take up the slack of the ones that you're not really processing on a cellular level. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but menopausal hormone therapy doesn't fix that either. It's happening regardless
Hmm.
of whether you're taking hormones or not. Because you have to keep in mind, menopausal hormone therapy does not recreate the hormonal environment of our 20s and 30s because there are so many layers of regulation of hormones. And plus, you've got the receptors. The receptors are the proteins on the surface of cells that receive the hormone signal in the blood. If the receptors aren't there, or the receptors are different or changing, then the way the hormone message is processed is going to be different. So when we put a patch on somebody for hormone therapy, we're doing that to like treat hot flashes and to treat symptoms. We're not doing that to recreate the
Right.
hormonal environment of youth. And that's why when you are on menopausal hormone therapy, it's not for body composition or weight loss. It's not going to help with that. That's not what it's used for. It's used to treat symptoms, help to prevent osteoporosis, help with vaginal dryness, et cetera, et cetera. So I just
Yeah,
want to make that distinction
yeah,
because it's important.
that makes total sense. And why do you think women and for men as well, as they age, as they get into their 70s and their 80s, they can't eat as much protein as they should be to maintaining that strength, that power, that endurance that they need to live an independent life? What is it about aging that makes them just not want to eat as much food and especially protein? My mom's 83 and it is really hard for her to get in 100 grams of protein.
I don't know. I don't know the reason. I don't know how prevalent that is, honestly. I do hear about it. My 94-year-old mother eats like a bird. I can't get her to eat either. So I see it in my own mom, but I don't know on a population basis how prevalent that is, and if there are certain groups of people that might be more prevalent in. So I don't have an answer for that one.
Yeah, I always wonder about that because of the high rates of sarcopenia.
hmm I mean, is it due to activity
Yeah.
declines? Is it due to sleep disturbance? There's a lot of other confounding factors that can impact people's appetites and people's activity levels, which really heavily influence bone and muscle loss. So there's a lot of confounding factors.
Yeah. Yeah. What about alcohol? A lot of postmenopausal women like to drink their alcohol. They have more time to socialize and parties and there's a lot of celebrations in life. But what are your thoughts on alcohol?
I can't speak to any specific studies that I've ever seen on alcohol in the menopausal population, but I can at least speak to the experience of patients that I've seen over the years in my own personal experience and
Hmm.
others of friends is that alcohol is often not tolerated as well at this stage of life than it was before. I know for many women, it can trigger hot flashes. I know for many women, they feel like they gain weight and feel bloated and have GI disturbances, and they just don't feel well on it. I know for myself, my sister used to be a wine importer, and so we're Italian, and we grew up with wine, in our household when we were young kids, and so I grew up and through most of my adult life would have a glass of wine with dinner. But when I got into perimenopause, well, I couldn't tolerate red wine anymore, so then it was white wine, and then I got into my 50s, and I'm like, God, I can't even do this anymore. And what it came down to for me was that I was teaching group fitness, so I'd be up in front of a class, doing a hit class. And if I even just had as much as a glass of prosecco the night before, I'd be feeling it. I'd feel dehydrated. I'd feel low energy. And at some point, I said, you know what? It's just not worth it. My workouts, my training, teaching my classes is more important to me than having that glass of prosecco. So I just stopped. And if I do have a glass of prosecco, I'm going to make sure that I don't have to teach a class the next day.
Right, for sure.
Or I'm not going to, get up and do a huge CrossFit workout the next day because I'm just going to feel really, really crappy. So I can't speak to any studies, but I know that is a very, very, very common thing in the stage of life that I have also experienced myself.
Yeah, it's really interesting from a health coach perspective. When I'm working with my clients, they will start off their sessions with me in the early session and they'll say, we're not going to talk about alcohol. I love my alcohol. It's not an option. I'm not giving it up. But by session like 6 or 7, once they start feeling better from other lifestyle interventions, other approaches, you start thinking, you know what? I want to be all into this. Like now I've got a little taste of that better life. And, they come up with their own motivation to take that out or greatly reduce it, just to go that one step further. So I think everybody has their own schedule to come to this. And I gave it up during COVID. People were increasing their alcohol intake during COVID. I just completely went cold turkey. I was never a drinker like you. It always affected me the next day. It started impeding on my workouts, my other health goals, right? And so it was just an easy give up. And I find that a lot of my postmenopausal women end up their last session with me not drinking alcohol. It's unbelievable. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think when people get that taste of,
Yeah.
wow, I can feel this good, then it's like it's a game changer. It changes the equation because it's
Yeah.
like, oh, wow, I can feel this good. Maybe that's kind of better than having that glass of wine.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean everybody has to cut
Right.
it out completely. I do still have a glass of Prosecco. I dilute it with spring water. It's really embarrassing. I try not to do that in public, but that's what I have to do. But I enjoy it, and it
Right.
doesn't impact me the next day. But yeah, you have to once you get that taste of how really good it feels,
Yeah.
then it can change people's minds about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So let's shift to talk about physical activity. And let's speak to the regular woman like myself. Post menopause, I'm not an athlete. I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not a recreational athlete. I just like to work out a lot. No competition. So there's a lot of postmenopausal women who are struggling to find what works for them, or maybe they're stuck doing the same thing, like just walking, which is wonderful, but it's not going to move the dial. And we know that we need to build lean muscle mass. So um, what directions would you give to that woman?
So if we're talking about general
Yep.
population, people who want to stay active,
Hmm.
the important thing, and this is important for athletes too, it's maintaining muscle mass and bone mass, as well as joint mobility and range of motion.
Yep.
Those are the basic ingredients to doing the things you want to do, whether it be hiking or kayaking, anything outdoors, just being able to run around and play with your grandchildren. Those are the basic things that you need. And so that's where the focus is. And so you want to take, well, what activities does the person do already? If they are just walking, then it really, really would help to make the leap to try to incorporate some weights into their routine. One really unintimidating way to introduce weights to somebody who has never used them are group fitness classes that are like boot camp classes. My
Hmm.
favorite is Les Mills. I'm a certified Les Mills instructor. I think the body pump program by Les Mills. It's Lesmills. It's outstanding. They really get you into knowing how to work with the barbell and how to work with weights, and it's fun. They put it to music, it's choreographed. All kinds of people join these classes, all age groups. I remember there was an 80-year-old woman who used to come to class all the time. And and group fitness is often a very unintimidating way to get involved with weights. So that could be a first step for somebody, because you can't just buy dumbbells and just
No,
automatically, throw on some YouTube videos and figure it out.
right,
That's no fun, and it's not safe either.
right.
And it's not always easy to go to the gym and sign up with a trainer. That's kind of intimidating too. But if you can get into some good group fitness classes and just get your hands on some weights, that can go a long way. And then that could be a segue to maybe, okay, I've been going to this group X class and I met this trainer, and maybe I can approach them now that I have a little bit more confidence, or even go to a CrossFit gym and, and get some more confidence. So that would be my suggestion for the person who's never really touched weights to start getting into doing that. Um, and so making sure that you have some of that, weight training, resistance training, at least 2 to 3 times a week. You also want to get that heart rate going, high intensity interval training, whether they're short intervals because you've never done them before, or whether you're experienced and, you want to do an insanity class, or, one of the group X classes that go for an hour. There's a whole range of how you can incorporate interval training into your routine. And sometimes it's as easy as doing like an 8-minute Tabata. And Tabata is seconds, like 20 seconds. The standard Tabata interval is 20 seconds of work
Mhm.
followed by 10 seconds of rest. So one easy thing you can do is jump on your stationary bike, or even go out and sprint on the road. Do that for 20 seconds, go
Yep.
all out sprint, and then rest for 10 seconds. Do this for 16 rounds or 8 minutes. And that will be one of the most efficient 8 minutes you will spend doing anything. So having, some of that interval training worked into your routine, maybe twice a week, and having some sort of weight training or resistance training incorporated 2 to 3 times a week, that gets anybody off to a great start for their muscles, their bones, their hearts, and their joints.
Yeah, I would agree. I like those approaches. I do Tabata classes on the Peloton and they are freaking brutal. And
Right?
you only need to do 20. If you could do 20 minutes, I've worked my way up to a 30-minute class, but 20 minutes, if that's all the time you have and you think that's not sufficient, oh boy, it is more than sufficient. Super hard. I get this question a lot from my postmenopausal clients who are trying to reach 7 to 10,000 steps a day, and they work out. They're very consistent with their daily routines, right? Weight training, they're doing some HIIT training. I actually tried to find this online and was unsuccessful. If you're doing a HIIT Peloton or HIIT running, do you still have to get the 7 to 10,000 steps? Like, how do you, and what if you're doing 45 minutes of weight training? Do you still have to get the 7 to 10,000 steps?
I think the step system is a good system for the sedentary person to be sure they're getting enough activity. I think that's the real value in the step system. But if you're somebody that is exercising consistently 4 to 6 times per week, I don't think you need the step system. I think it's a great segue for someone who doesn't exercise to actually get more active. But once you are in that zone where you're training, doing your resistance training 3 times a week, or you're doing running or whatever, you're training 4 to 6 times a week, you don't need the step meter.
Oh, thank you. Because I do try to get in 7 to 10,000 steps. One, I love walking and it's so beautiful outside now. But sometimes I feel like, if I've already done all this work, why do I have to do that as well? So that's a great answer. Let's talk about exercise nutrition. Um, a lot of women do not want to wake up in the morning and eat food before an early morning workout. It's like impossible, right? If you're going to eat a small meal to fuel, you need a good, 60 to 90 minutes to even digest that foods before you can utilize it as energy for your workout. So go through all the things. The person who can eat in the morning and work out later, the person who's going to wake up at 5 and be on the bike by 5:15. How do they navigate all of this?
Well, I'm going to be very honest and very frank. I think fasted training is the kiss of death, especially in menopause, because that is going to spike your cortisol to the moon. Because again, women are very, very sensitive to energy imbalance. It's just the way we're wired. And so I do get it. I've got lots of clients who just can't imagine eating anything. But there are other options. There is a shake. There is maybe a little bit of a banana. Maybe there is something really small that isn't going to take 90 minutes to clear from your system. But going into a training session after fasting overnight, and I'll even quote Stacy Sims on this. Stacy Sims is the guru in this
Yeah.
area, and also talks about that this can be very detrimental. And as an endocrinologist, I can tell you what it's doing to your hormones. So fasted training is something I do universally try to tell my clients to avoid as much as possible. But when I do have those clients that just can't imagine eating anything, I do suggest a shake, because it doesn't sit in your stomach like food, but it does have some nutrients that can at least get your workout started. Nutrient timing, and I'm not just talking about fasted training, I'm talking about in general, is really important at this stage of life because of that sensitivity to energy availability that women have. The body is looking for food before the workout as it gets ready, and it's looking for fuel after the workout. So by having a little something with carbs and protein before, within an hour or two, and then having, maybe a larger portion of carbs and protein after the workout within an hour, ideally, is going to let the body know that there isn't a famine happening and that fuel is available. And then that will help with recovery, and it will help bring that stress response system back to baseline.
But I want to get really nitpicky here. What if we're talking about a woman who's taking thyroid medications? She wakes up, she takes her thyroid medication. She can't have coffee. She can't have anything for, some doctors say 30 minutes, other doctors say 2 hours. So there's that vast window, but that's their window to work out before they have to get the kids going or get to work. So what does that person do?
Change when you take your thyroid medication, or change when you work out. That I'm being honest.
No, that's why you're here.
Fasted training is not good for menopausal women unless you have metabolic imbalances. So I don't want to totally trash fasting because there is a place for it. If you have metabolic syndrome, if you have some metabolic disturbances, if you are obese, fasting can help with obesity. But if we're talking about the non-obese
Yeah.
active woman, fasted training is the kiss of death because it's going to jack your cortisol, and it's going to impair your recovery, and it's going to put you behind the 8 ball for the rest of the day. And so if you are one that takes thyroid medication and needs to have that window of time, maybe you need to change when you take it, or maybe you can try to find a way in your schedule to work out at a different time of day.
Hmm.
But if it were me in that situation, I would make it a priority not to train fasted.
Hmm. Okay. And then what about using supplements like BCAAs, EAAs, so branched chain amino acids or essential amino acids, maybe electrolytes? What are your thoughts on supplements instead of eating something? If
I
someone
don't
is
think
like, no way am I going to eat something, I can't even have a shake, it's going to make me want to throw up, you know, can we replace it with these other
there's
nutrients?
there's no replacement for
Really?
food. I mean, you need a carbohydrate source, you need a protein source. Branched chain amino acids are amino acids, but they're not
Hmm.
proteins. They're not going to be processed the same way. And if what you're taking in isn't a carbohydrate, nothing is going to work like a carbohydrate to fuel your muscles and everything else. If you're that person, then I think you just find the best way to adapt that you can. But honestly, I don't have a solution for someone. Like I said, I am not a believer in fasted training.
Yeah.
From an endocrinology standpoint, it goes against how we are wired as women from a hormonal standpoint.
Give me your three top pre-workout snack options.
Top three. Okay. I like an apple, like a half of an apple with maybe a little bit of nut butter, or a hard boiled egg and a half of an apple, Sometimes some Ezekiel toast with a little bit of nut butter gives you a little bit. Greek yogurt with a little fruit is awesome. That's probably four. But yeah, those are the things that come to mind, that I suggest have a little bit of both of the carbohydrate and the protein that you need.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
What about creatine for the postmenopausal woman? Yay or nay?
Yay for everybody. It is one of the most highly studied supplements in the industry, and it's probably one of the safest supplements in the industry. The people who will benefit from creatine are people who are active, especially if they're doing resistance training consistently. They're the ones that are going to receive the most benefit. A lot of the studies surrounding creatine in sedentary people don't show the same benefit. But in people who are active, it tends to show more benefit. It can have cognitive benefits. It can be good for your bones and certainly for your muscles. So I am a big fan of creatine.
What about one of the symptoms of taking creatine, especially in the beginning, is you start to feel a little bit bloated. And some women feel that lingering bloat as, 4, 6, and 8 weeks in. What are some strategies to get rid of that? Because you also are going to put on a little bit of weight. It's not fat, it's your muscles soaking in that fluid, that water, right? And so,
People do, some people don't. I don't think everybody gains weight on it. I think some people definitely feel bloated. I
yeah,
mean, that's absolutely a side effect. But the way I usually counsel people on creatine is first get a pure
yeah,
supplement. I personally like Thorne creatine.
yep,
All it is creatine monohydrate. It's as pure as it gets, and there's no funny proprietary stuff, magic stuff in there. That a lot of supplement companies will put forward. So get something that's pure. That's the first thing. Second thing, think about what you eat during the day. If you are a vegan and you don't eat any animal protein, you're going to need more creatine because a natural source of creatine is in animal protein. So someone who is a vegan is going to need a little more. So they're going to need like that full 5 grams. So when someone is starting out on creatine, you could start with a half a scoop, which is typically, 2.5.
right.
Do that for a couple of weeks, see how your body deals with that. And then if you're dealing with that just fine, see if you can go up to the 5. And then, if you notice on the 5 that you have some bloating, then, go back to the half a scoop. But I would strive for 5 if you are someone that doesn't take in any animal protein. If you are someone that does eat animal protein, you probably need less. And that would probably be in that, 2.5, 3, 4 gram range.
Yeah. Um, is creatine something that you're going to take lifelong if you're an active person? So in your 70s and 80s, are you still going to be taking creatine?
I think as long as you don't have any chronic health issues that could make creatine not a good thing, like kidney
Right,
disease
kidneys.
or any liver disease. I think if you have any chronic illnesses, you do want to double check with your doctor because as we get older, kidney function does decline under the best of circumstances. So I think if you're in your 70s and 80s, just check in with your doc. But in the absence of any of that, I don't see any reason why one shouldn't.
Yeah. Let's segue into sleep hygiene. Sleep, starting in perimenopause. I mean, actually starting if you're a young mom like I was in my mid 20s and you're having babies, like your sleep is just destroyed, right? And then you kind of exit that for a little bit and then you enter perimenopause and it gets a little bit destroyed again. And then you hit menopause, postmenopause. Just seems like we can never get it right. Some women are really lucky and have amazing sleep, but I would say the vast majority are women who struggle. Either they have insomnia or they wake up at 2 or 3 like clockwork every single morning. Maybe they have to get up twice to urinate. So talk about postmenopause and sleep and what can we do?
It is a tough one, and you're right. It's like we go through our lives. I know for me, I did a residency because I'm a physician. That was my training, and that was incredible sleep deprivation. And of course, I had my son, and my son was never a sleeper, so that got me into my early 40s, and then perimenopause hit, and now that my son is a teenager and sleeping constantly, now I'm having hot flashes that keeps me up. So I don't know when
Right.
it's going to end. But sleep is tremendously important. I'm glad you bring it up. I have found for me meditation to be very, very helpful. The skills you learn in meditation of how to turn the brain off and how to really focus on the present moment and the breath and your body, I think is tremendously helpful and has helped me a lot in getting back to sleep. If I'm one of those 3 a.m. wake up people, and I know so many women are, that's their struggle. They can fall asleep, no problem,
Yeah.
but 3 a.m., the body's waking them up for X, Y, or Z reason. So I like meditation for that. I think practically, when I have a patient that comes to me and tells me about their sleep, the first things I approach is, okay, are you working out, eating, or drinking too close to bedtime? Those three things can impact
Mm-hmm.
sleep detrimentally. If you're having a 24-ounce Starbucks at, an hour before you go to bed, that's not going to help you.
Right.
So I have people try to work on some of those habits as a first step to optimize sleep. And of course, the cool room, cooling the room down, trying to minimize distractions. If you have a dog that sleeps with you and the dog is up all the time, maybe we find the dog a nice, comfortable bed on the floor. Those types of things that are tangible to work on are the first things that I target. Um, and then, what if you have hot flashes at night? Well, if you have hot flashes at night, then, hormone therapy is a great treatment for that. And there's lots of different types of hormone and non-hormone therapies that can help with hot flashes that may wake you up at night. The other thing that bothers menopausal women is those urinary symptoms. I mean, if you're getting up to urinate, 2, 3, 4 times a night, that's going to disrupt any sleep that you get. And that's when you kind of have to think, okay, am I drinking too much? Do I have to maybe stop drinking at 6 p.m. if I'm going to bed at 10? There's a lot of trial and error there. But sometimes people need to go for like urodynamic studies to see, do they have any urge incontinence? Are there any other things that are causing the bladder to be hyperactive that maybe some medication will help and to decrease that urgency? So that's another big one. So that's kind of my approach is, just trying to tackle lifestyle and then some of the medical symptomatology that oftentimes wakes people up.
What about supplements for sleep? I love things like that work specifically for me, things like inositol, L-theanine, magnesium. I do sort of like a sleep cocktail around 9 o'clock at night, and by 9:45, I am just passed out. So, what are your thoughts on enhancing someone's sleep by doing something like that?
I love magnesium. I think that's a great, great way to go. And I think so many people are magnesium deficient,
Yeah,
especially if they train often.
yeah.
Yeah, I know it was a game changer for me. It actually even helped my hot flashes. So, who knew? So I think magnesium is excellent. Valerian tea is another thing that can help people with sleep. It helped me for a while. And then the strangest thing happened. It was keeping me awake. And I'm like, why is it keeping me awake? And it was hot tea. And I'm like, okay, I'm raising my core temperature before I go to bed and it's triggering my
Mm,
hot flashes. So it worked for a little bit and then it didn't. So, you kind of have to go with the flow because things will change. But yeah, magnesium is one of my personal faves. But I know other people have their sleep cocktails, like you mentioned, and
yeah,
certainly any of it is worth a try. Trial and error
yeah.
is king during this phase of life because there's no one thing that helps everybody.
Yeah, one of the things I like to talk about with my clients who are struggling with sleep is really assessing what their morning looks like. You can get out of your house and get that early morning sun for 10, 15 minutes and reset that circadian rhythm, just sort of get into this a habit. And of course, I'm in Chicago, so in the winter it's really hard, but it's doable, right? Even if you just open your window and look into the sun, look towards the sun, not into the sun, but towards the sun for a few minutes, that's going to help. So I try to sometimes work backwards. Like, let's start with the morning. What does that look like for you? Are you waking up and automatically putting on your computer while you're laying in bed or looking at your phone? That's not the best way to start your day. So yeah, I agree. A lot of trial and error when it comes to sleep because it can be really frustrating and sort of impede on all the other lifestyle factors we're talking about, the ability to lose weight, the ability to change your body composition. Even for me, I had, hair loss during perimenopause, and also before that as well, due to my partial thyroidectomy. But, really getting that sound sleep makes everything at night work. I always talk about it in the analogy of the street cleaners coming out at night. There's all this magic that's going on. So you have to prioritize and protect your sleep at all costs.
Without a doubt,
Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
100%.
So we're coming to an end, and I wanted to just touch base on something you and I talked about going back and forth in email, which is building someone's team, and not necessarily a healthcare team, in the terms of all medical professionals, but really expanding that to think about more people to bring on your team as you're aging and as you're going through this postmenopausal phase in your life. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's probably just the way medicine and fitness and wellness are advancing is that we're learning so much about so many things that providers are getting more and more specialized. And as providers, whether you're a healthcare provider or whether you're a fitness provider or wellness provider, people are getting more specialized and are living in individual silos and not really communicating with one another. They're really,
Yeah.
really super good at that one thing, but there's no way to communicate with someone else that has a specialty that is also important. So to take the abstractness out of that, I think everybody should have their primary care physician that they have a relationship with. Somebody that if they develop high blood pressure, that can treat that. Somebody who, if they develop high cholesterol, they can treat that. Obesity medicine, that's also very helpful for people who are struggling with obesity and trying to lose weight. That's even a special
Yeah.
subspecialty. Um, but the one thing that is missing in medicine is knowledge about fitness, wellness, and nutrition. And that has always been an issue because in medical school, they don't teach us really anything about that. And it's only gotten worse. So, what you need on your team, because fitness, wellness, and nutrition is such an important part of aging, especially for menopausal women. I mean, we spent 90% of this show talking about it.
Yeah.
You need an individual who is skilled in that area. I think everybody should have a health coach. I think everybody should have a coach, someone who knows you, somebody who can keep you on track and help you identify the things in your life that you need. So, a good primary care physician, a health coach, and then other, like if you really want to amp up your nutrition, you maybe get some nutrition coaching. If you need a personal trainer to help you with strength training, maybe you really want to get into the barbells and learn how to do some Olympic lifting, get a strength coach. So think about your goals, think about who's on your team now, and then you can make some accommodations. But at the very least, a primary care physician,
Yeah.
a health coach, and a trainer.
Yeah.
And
I love.
many times health coaches are trainers as well. They have that dual
Yeah,
function.
absolutely. And there are physicians who are health coaches also.
Mhm.
But I love that you called out the attention to health coaches because I think we play a vital role in someone's health journey. I'd also like to add a preventive cardiologist at this age, because I think that GPs are fantastic, but they don't specialize in preventive cardiovascular risks. And so I think as we age, especially if you've decided not to be on menopause hormone therapy, that might be someone that you see only once a year. And just to get a deep dive into more advanced labs on your cardiovascular disease risk, if that's something that runs in your family, or something that you worry about. So that would be the only thing that I would add on. Oh, I wrote down a good vacation planner. Someone who really knows you, that you also have a relationship with, who, maybe you're someone there's all these menopausal retreats popping up and they're high quality, and you're with a group of women, you're all on the same journey, you're bringing different perspectives and different experiences. So someone who's going to help you sort of expand your experience and explore more because you're going to have more time to do that. Dr. Carla, thank you so much again for joining me. I absolutely love the way that you are so direct with your information. And you also have an amazing newsletter that I read every time you send it out called Athletic Aging. And I'm going to put all of your contact information in the show notes, but talk a little bit about athletic aging and what that means to you, and what you're trying to come across, because I want everyone listening to go subscribe to that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for the plug for that. So,
Yeah.
Athletic Aging is a newsletter. It's on the Substack platform. And I started it probably almost 3 years ago now. And the intent was to give education and practical knowledge that women can use every day going through this perimenopausal and menopausal journey. Every Monday, there's a weekly workout, and the workouts I design, I'm a CrossFit trainer, and I have some special training in workout programming. So I program workouts that are specifically beneficial for midlife women. And I write a little blog as to the why about the workout, and these come out every single Monday. And so the other posts that I have some on creatine, I have some on strength training, and I also have a medical update section where
Hmm.
I take some actual, literature, like whenever the new hormone therapy position statements come out from the Menopause Society, I will review those and summarize some of the pertinent literature that is coming out, and that's in the medical update section. But yeah, the goal is to educate women, provide objective information, and I'm as direct in my newsletter as I am on the podcast,
Hmm.
because we don't need to be sugarcoating things at this point. We need real
Yep.
solutions, and we need real facts. We don't need to be messing around with sugarcoating things. So that's what the newsletter aims to do. It provides good practical information that's objective and
Yeah,
without
it's
all the
great.
fluff.
I've shared it with so many of my clients. It's extremely helpful. And I do some of the bits and pieces from the workouts, just so you know. So people are reading and doing it. Well,
That's
thank you
good. I'm
again. It
glad to
was
hear.
lovely to see you. Have a wonderful rest of your summer. And everyone listening, you've got a lot of golden nuggets to soak in and hopefully walk away and put into some action for yourself. So thanks again for tuning in to the Health Trip Podcast. And thanks again, Dr. Carla.
Likewise, Jill. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Lifestyle changes can be hard and overwhelming to make. By building your support team of functional medicine doctors, therapists, and health coaches, you can reach your optimal health goals. Be sure to check out my other podcasts. Until we meet again, stay healthy.